made us whole. Not one hug, not one soul.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the second segment of the Cajun Conservative Show. Today, I have the honor and privilege of having on the show Dr. Michael Schwartz. He is a writer of Fauci's fiction. Got the book in today and read a little bit. Very fascinating book. And Dr. Michael, welcome to the show today. And how you doing, first off?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Isaac. I appreciate your time.
Oh, all the pleasures is mine, man. I love when writers come and talk to send me emails like, hey, we want to come on your show. And there's so many books out there, Dr. Michael, and I love when y'all guys send us books and want to come on to get the word out about things that need to be told.
Yeah, that was the important part of this book. You know, we were the first company in New Jersey to do a COVID test, and I have a couple offices. I'm down in Tampa, Florida now. I was down in Key West, and I have a clinic up here in Jersey. So we were literally the first company to do a COVID test, and culminating with 19,000 patients, 44,000 tests. I think we're the only company in the country that has horizontal data. What that means is we tested a lot of the same people every single week for 3 years, a lot of cops and assisted livings. So the need came out. The need was there to write this book. I had so many patients that we would talk to every day about this stuff that's in here. And, you know, it's kind of amazing. After 3 years, no one understands how viruses transmit, how tests work. It was so important to tell the real facts about COVID. It's not, even though it's called Fauci's fiction, it's not about Anthony Fauci, but the data has everything to do with Anthony Fauci.
So let's go on, you know, with that. Tell us a little bit about your background, you know, because a lot of people would say, well, look, you wrote this book right here, and you know, but are you a real expert in this stuff? So let's get a little bit of your background.
Sure. Well, I'm a research doctor. I've got 5 different degrees. I have a very diverse background. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. I'm a private pilot. I'm a former police officer. I have 3 different business degrees. My job is to analyze data, but I do own medical clinics. So it's funny because a lot of folks will come up to you and say, well, you're not a medical doctor. Well, I never purported to be. It tells you in the first paragraph in the book that I'm a research doctor, and my job is to analyze data, but I employ medical staff. So I have MDs, DOs, a lot of NPs that work for us. And when you're looking at the data on the ground, you know, I have a couple medical certifications as well. And when you're analyzing this stuff every day, you start to notice trends. And the trends that we saw every day did not match what the CDC, the government, the media was telling everybody in the country. And now a lot of the country is kind of caught up. You're starting to see that, oh, we realized vaccines didn't work. Well, you know, we told everybody this when before the vaccines came out, that they were going to work like flu shots. That's how they're engineered. That's kind of the point of the book. It's funny. Folks will come up to me and say, hey, hindsight's 2020. It's great to have shows like yours on. I actually did a podcast over 2 years ago. It's called Calderese Unleashed. And I did a long form 2-hour episode pretty much explaining everything that's in this book way before it came out. So we were trying to get the information out to the public that this wasn't as deadly as everybody thought, that the mortality rate was going to come down. We predicted it would be kind of close to the flu, and that's where it is right now. We let folks know that there was going to be some issues with the vaccines. We could talk about that if you want. But a lot of this stuff that folks don't understand. I mean, it's kind of blows your mind when you're in the middle of a global pandemic that everybody's telling you, hey, people are dying from, and this could be the worst thing we've ever seen in our entire lives. The quicker you get that information out to the public, the better, because we saw that the cure was in some cases worse than the disease. You know, the schools shut down, the lockdowns, the suicide rates going up. So that's kind of the point of the book. It explains COVID from the 30,000-foot view.
Now, you're talking about, because you have Fauci on the front of the cover. So you're here. You remember with the lockdowns and stuff. With this disease, they did ask people to shut down their business, but they didn't just ask. They told them, hey, you have to shut down. We have to shut down the economy. You have to shut down your churches. You got to shut down everything. But according to Dr. Fauci of August of 2022, he said that was never done. He only recommended that be done.
I don't think the public feels that way, especially the folks that lost their jobs. I just got off TV. I was doing an interview on OAN, and they were talking about the New York City school teachers getting their jobs back. I think it was 1,750 people lost their jobs, not just teachers, but in the entire in Manhattan or New York City. And they finally got their jobs back because a judge ruled that they didn't look at the religious exemption. And I said on TV, I said, what about the smart, objection? What about the people that were intelligent enough to say, hey, no, this is my body? Yeah, they forced a lot of people into doing a lot of things, whether it was, 15 days to stop the spread, which turned into almost, a couple of years, or folks losing their jobs. It was blatantly inappropriate. I think that's the point, Isaac. We knew a lot of this stuff within about 2 months. We had, at that point when we had enough, we were we were the first company to do a COVID test. So by the time we had about 2 to 3, maybe 400 patients under our belt, we started to draw those trend lines out and say, hey, this is kind of what we expect. And we're trying to tell folks, but as you see with what happened with Twitter and what happens with the mainstream media, if it wasn't for guys like you online telling people the truth, the public would never know.
And look, I'm getting heat for it right now because, yeah, as you know, there is another variant out there that has come from Canada, surprisingly, right before the 2024 election. You have schools that are saying, hey, we're going into full blown protocol for COVID. You have a movie studio, Lionsgate, saying, look, we're going to go into full blown coronavirus protocol. You even have the White House in protocol, in COVID-19 protocols. And look, Dr. Michael, as you said, a lot of this stuff was proven at the beginning, and we didn't have to go through all this, but they're still pushing those same lies now. And you have to wonder, is that a political, agenda behind that to stop people from necessarily, like, basically interfering with the election going forward because they're going to try to keep people in their homes again?
There's a lot of science to it, and that's part of the problem. And, you can go on an interview, you can talk for 15 minutes and kind of get some of this stuff out, but that's why I wrote a book. I can tell you how the numbers disappeared and how they could come back at some point, because you got to understand, a virus, first of all, isn't a living thing. A virus is, it's like an amino acid. It's either active or inactive. And what a virus does is it makes a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. There are thousands of variants out there that you've never heard of, because viruses, the moment they enter your system, are looking for the best version of themselves to survive. Most of them burn out. So when you talk about a new variant, it's just a new variant that knows how to bind better. The thousands of variants that have burned out, you just don't ever hear about. And there are variants that are binding fairly well. COVID has never gone anywhere. The reason that the government takes credit for the numbers going down is pretty simple, and I can explain it to your viewers here. Yeah. What happens, I could draw a line, and I don't know if I'm going left or right here. I'll just go across. But when the numbers you saw in the beginning, that spike you saw, that, oh my God, the test numbers are going up, that wasn't the actual number of COVID cases out there. That was the number of tests of cases we could catch up with the amount of equipment we had in early March and April of 2020. Once the labs came out with some ingenious ideas and they created their own test kits, and the CARES Act got instituted, that allowed anybody in the country to get a test at any time. And when you tested everyone in the country, you found out that everybody had it, so the numbers go way up. When they instituted the rapid test and gave that out to everybody, every household, I think there were 8 per household in the country, those numbers don't get reported. You're not at home getting a rapid test, calling the county saying, hey, I'm positive, I need to isolate. Not happening. So those numbers then go artificially down. When the CARES Act expired and you could not get a test anymore in this country, now you have to have a symptom. It's back to what it was in the beginning: cough, fever, or shortness of breath. But I will tell you, in my data of over 19,000 patients and 4,000 positives, 90% of my positive patients were asymptomatic. They never had a symptom. That tells you that most folks who have this never get a symptom. So in order to test now, you have to have a symptom. So when you do that and you have to have a symptom to test, guess what? The numbers go way down. So then the government comes back and says, hey, we solved COVID. If they start to reinstitute a form of the CARES Act again, where they start allowing everybody to test, because, by the way, the numbers are still out there. COVID is very real. It's just not as deadly as everybody purported it to be. But the numbers are out there. We're actually having a surge right now. We were having a surge. I told my immunologist weeks ago, before you heard it on TV, that we were having a surge. He didn't believe me. Then he called me 3 weeks later and said, you were right. I'm in the lab. We're having a surge. I said, yeah, this is what we do for a living. We are kind of experts on this. If they start to institute a version of the CARES Act where everybody can test, those numbers will artificially then go up again. I shouldn't say artificially. You will catch what's out there. And that, if that drives the narrative, and then I know, a lot of hosts will want to talk about the elections and starting to, let's do the mail-in ballots. If you start seeing that again, that would be the narrative at that point. That would be where the direction that they're going if they start allowing everybody to test again.
So on a question like this, because I've come on this podcast multiple times already, and I said I'm not wearing a mask. So if I don't wear a mask, or as I have never taken a vaccination for COVID, and I don't plan to. But that's me. I'm a free man. I could do that. I should be I should be all right then if I don't put on a mask. Like a lot of people are saying that we should go back to.
Okay. So first of all, number one, I applaud you for not taking the vaccine. You're a smart man. Neither did I. And a lot of people will ask me, they said, did you have the vaccine? And I say, no, because I'm not an idiot. So welcome to my world, Isaac. You and I are on the same page. And by the way, we did not recommend a vaccine in the beginning because we thought there was going to be issues. We are seeing them now. The reason we didn't recommend the vaccine to any of our patients was because it didn't work. Within a couple months of the vaccines being out, we started calling our patients and what they would call on TV breakthrough cases. We never use that word. You could break. We told our patients from the beginning you were going to need multiple shots, that you were probably going to need this once a year like a flu shot. And what we see in practice is a 120-day antibody response. We don't see long-term immunity. We don't see 10 years or life immunity like polio. We see 120 days. So it is kind of irresponsible to call this thing a vaccine in the first place. That's number one. But you had asked about, and now I'm skipping over, you had asked about the masks. We never required a mask in our offices ever. We do not wear cloth masks or surgical masks for virons. A lot of people will ask you, why do you wear them in the hospital? Our staff wears them in the hospital so we don't get over splatter on our face and we don't drool into the operative field. And I equate it to something like this, Isaac. If I were to take you to the Wuhan lab or the Winnipeg lab in Canada, and I wanted to walk you through the viral area where we test the viruses, and I said, here, put this cloth mask on, you would think I was nuts. It only takes one live particle to infect you, period. And the something the size of COVID, you could fit 500 million on a pinhead. When you have somebody symptomatic in a room, they are so small, they do not settle by gravity. They are literally floating around the room. So when you have somebody symptomatic in a room, you're breathing in millions of particles. One live particle can infect you. And if you think a cloth mask, and we're not talking about using the filter, we're not talking about, this is not duct taped to your face. You've got areas where you're sucking air in, the path of least resistance. It's doing zero for, it's actually making it worse, because the majority of the patients that wear those on their face every day are coming in our offices with staph infections, RSV, H flu. There's a ton of bacterial pathogens, Moraxella catarrhalis, Klebsiella pneumonia, and they wind up getting these things because these things are breeding ground for bacteria.
And it's just funny. Something that's supposed to help you is knowing more to hurt you. So let's talk about the testing, because I read part of the book where you said that the media would say one thing. Y'all will tell you patients, no, this is the real data, and they wouldn't believe you. Is that still going on 3 years after? Since I know your book's out to explain all of it, but you still deal with patients and you still do COVID research.
Yeah, I mean, it's slowed down quite a bit. Once the CARES Act expired and you're not allowed to test anymore, that slowed down. Now we only see a sick patient once in a while, and every time we run a respiratory path. Let me talk about that for a second. It's very important. Before COVID existed, when you came into one of our offices, we would do what's called a respiratory pathogen panel. So our patients knew what COVID swabs were before the rest of the world did, because if you came to me sick, we'd swab you. There were 30 things on our panel at that time. Now there are 31 to include COVID. It is very important that you diagnose exactly what you're treating. So if and most people who were sick with COVID had a co-infection to go along with it. You would not know that if you were doing a rapid test or if you were doing a COVID only test. So it is very important to go to a practitioner that knows what they're doing. Unfortunately, most of these guys and gals shut their offices down at the beginning of COVID. They were scared to bring it home. And these were the same people now recommending a vaccine, knowing nothing about COVID. It's kind of contradictory and it's stupid. I lost a lot of respect for the medical community. I lost a lot, and I work with a lot of good doctors too, but I lost a lot of respect for the greater medical community, the CDC, the NIH, people like Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx. They were coming out telling you, certain things. Just to distribute a rapid test. You cannot confirm COVID on a rapid test. Oh. That is one of the stupidest things I have ever seen. And if I explain that, your mind will be blown. It's explained in the book, but you can only diagnose COVID on a PCR test, period. If someone is using a rapid test, they come in and they tell me they were positive or negative, I kind of laugh in their face at this point.
Yeah, there's so much, and I know we only on a 15 to 20 minute interview, but there's so much in this topic that we can get to. But the mention of COVID, I'm seeing people ride around by themselves in masks now, and like you said, I think this book's going to explain a lot to people that they just didn't know about it. It's strange that we're 3 years in, we still don't know. Us as like you done this all the time, you know a lot about it, but the normal person like myself, we still don't know that much about COVID.
You know, I used to get very upset with some of my patients because I'd say, come on, you're an adult. You have time to go out there and do research and pay attention. But I can't blame them. I can't blame guys that are sitting around saying, hey, I just don't know, because the media and the government were not letting the information out. You know, I was talking to political candidates at the time. I was talking to senators, assembly people in my state, trying to let them know, hey, this is a little ridiculous the way we're handling this, and here's why. They would hear what I say, and then they would say something like, well, why are you the only guy saying this? And I'm realizing, well, there's a lot of doctors like me, research, medical, otherwise, that are saying this, but they're being shadow banned. They're being censored. Now the public is starting to catch up because, you know, at this point now, I think everybody knows that the vaccines don't work like traditional vaccines.
Right.
It took us a long enough time to get that information out. We were trying to tell them right from the beginning, but took probably a good year and a half before people realized. And people still don't understand. There's still people, like you said, wearing masks in their cars. And like I said, we don't wear them in the office. And people would come in our office and say, why aren't you wearing a mask? Because we practice real medicine, because we understand science. We'd rather teach you the truth so that you know how to protect yourselves, rather than, you know, just perpetuate a narrative that makes you feel better mentally. I mean, I want you to feel better, but not for the sake of lying to you, just to get through the day. Let's all work together to understand this thing. Yeah, that's kind of the point of the book, Isaac. I mean, it is a shame. Your listeners should be upset that they got locked down, that the suicide rate went up, that their businesses shut down. I have friends who've lost their businesses. We should all be very upset, and somebody should be held accountable for this, because somebody is culpable for doing this. I shouldn't have been the only one that had this information in the beginning. The government had to know this, and guys like me were trying to tell them. They took away a lot of medical licenses from folks in California for trying to get information out like this, because it said it didn't go with the narrative that the CDC was pushing. Yet these people were screaming out the top of their lungs to try to protect guys like you and me from doing something stupid. So we didn't shut our businesses down and commit suicides and all this nonsense that we saw. So it's a real shame.
And you know, so we didn't shut down for COVID because we were part of construction. We were part of the essential people. But you know what got me upset, Dr. Michael, was more the churches. You know, I just, because maybe you can answer this. How come COVID was immune in Walmart, Home Depot, Super One, but you go into a church building to worship God? Oh my goodness, COVID was going rampant in the churches, and you had to be 6 feet apart. You had to do live streams and stuff. And we're seeing, as a youth pastor and as a minister, I'm seeing the data. You know how many people say, well, we really don't need to go to church no more. We just watch it on Facebook. And I'm just, that bothers me, because you took something that was essential to people's lives and said, oh, well, now we can just watch it on Facebook.
Right. Yeah, I applaud the work you're doing, Isaac, and that's great that you're helping out with the kids of this nation and trying to get them on the right path. It is kind of reprehensible that they said, you know, it's okay in Walmart, and people will tell you all the time it's about money, right?
Right.
But who's the government gonna piss off? If you pissed off too many people, they would revolt. So it was like, where's the fine line? You know what? I talked about this on a show not too long ago on the plane scenario. You know, when they started instituting masks on the plane, I said if 50% of us said we're not doing this is stupid, but the other 50% said we are doing this, they would have kicked us off, not them, because they were complying. Where was that critical mass? You know, when would it be? Would it be 75%? Would it be 90%? What would the ratio have to be for enough of us to say enough is enough before the country would give in? We gave up a lot of our freedoms, and we didn't need to. I wish people had this information out there before they got the shots, because we are, like I said, we're seeing a ton of heart issues, joint issues, stuff that we're finding a year, 2 years later on an incidental finding that we have a study to prove it wasn't there. They fooled a lot of people, and it was at the expense of our youth, especially of our folks who want to go to church and pray and get together and congregate, which was what we were missing in all these years by being locked down. It is a real sad day. Like I said, I mean, look, we're taught in the religious community to forgive, right?
Right.
But we can never let this happen again.
No.
Learning is just as important, because the folks that don't learn from this, we are doomed to let history repeat itself.
And I think that's because Anthony Fauci the other day made a statement saying, well, I hope people comply because, it really is essential to their health. And I'm thinking to myself, there's too many Americans like myself and you that will say no. And I think people are starting, like you said, starting to educate themselves to say, wait a minute, we're not going to let this happen again in this country because, okay, and this is where the politics come to the side of it. I honestly believe, Dr. Michael, that if Trump was not president, our economy would have went to crap. And we would not have survived as a nation. The reason we survived economically in COVID-19 was because of Donald Trump, in my humble opinion. If we would shut down the country now with the Biden economics, God help this nation. People would lose money, and our economy would crash. That's my honest assessment of this situation.
We're kind of getting there now, Isaac. It's the indicators are there. If you look at the inflation rate, if you look at the economy, interest rates, there are a lot of banks that have gone out of business as of late. There are a lot of indicators that are showing us that we are pretty much on the brink. And I agree with you. Donald Trump gave us a stellar economy, one that we haven't seen in many, many years. But I don't think COVID would have been COVID if it wasn't smack dab in the middle of a presidential election. These folks used this. They exploited this. They exploited what we had in a good economy to probably, and I don't write about this in the book because I don't get into conspiracies. I just write about the data.
Right.
You can make your own determination. But a lot of hosts ask me and they say, what do you think? It's obvious that they exploited this. It's obvious that they took a full advantage of mail-in ballots and trying to blame this on COVID. I was just telling you how the numbers go up and down. It's artificial. It has nothing to do with the president, what he did. And then, of course, I get people who get triggered just at this cover, who haven't read a word of the data that's in here, and they think I'm bashing Fauci. I'm not. He's mentioned 3 times. They think it's a MAGA book. Donald Trump is mentioned twice in this entire book. It has nothing to do with politics. But that just shows you the dichotomy in this country. Liberals are getting triggered at the cover, where conservatives will sit here and read it and say, hey, I read the data and wow, you did a great job. And there's a lot of stuff I didn't know. I finally did have a couple liberals read this book and get back to me, and I was really nervous about what they were going to say. What I realized was quite different. I might have a market here, Isaac, because those folks, they haven't heard what we've been talking about. They haven't discussed this. They don't watch the same channels we watch. They watch MSNBC and CNN. So they've never heard any of this, where you've probably heard half of this already. And those folks that read it went, wow, you blew my mind. I didn't know any of this. So maybe there's a market for people in the middle that can come back to us, and maybe we can get this country back at some point. But I mean, the dichotomy, the polarization that we see, was obviously this was politically exploited.
And look, I disprove every liberal that says, oh, that wasn't political. It was really. It's funny, when Trump was in office, you had the death count on every channel, including Fox News.
Yep.
Biden gets in office, maybe not even 2 weeks. All of a sudden, they pull it off, and all of a sudden, COVID is not as bad. So, just that little indicator right there is showing there was something going with this. So Dr. Michael, we're getting close to the end of our segment here. Let everybody know where they can find the book. Is Fauci's Fiction. Go ahead and let them know where they can find it. And also tell them about your podcast, because we want to advertise that as well.
I appreciate that. I just started it. The podcast is called Mike's Right. We just released our 3rd episode. Maybe I'll have you on there, Isaac, as a
anytime.
guest. I'd love to talk about. I have a lot of friends in Louisiana. We did some projects with my charity, Hometown Heroes, down there years ago. So I always miss you guys. I'd love to see you. The book, you can find it anywhere books are sold. I always tell everybody Amazon's the easiest way. Fauci's Fiction, it's available anywhere books are sold. You can go to my website, michaeljschwartz.com, or you can go to faucisfiction.com, which takes you to my website. And you can find the Amazon link. So check it out. Look it up. It's doing pretty well. It's getting great reviews, and I hope everybody checks it out.
And the cover is on the screen right now, and go ahead and check it out. So, Dr. Michael, thank you for coming on. And like you said, if you want me on, let me know anytime. I would love to come on and chat with you and give you some Cajun wisdom.
It is a deal, Isaac. Thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Now, before we get off, though, I say this all the time. If you have in Louisiana, let me know. We'll get some good food. But you've been down here. How is our food down here? Because you're from up north, if I'm not mistaken.
I am, but I'm in a different. I'm at the Jersey Shore. It's kind of like its own country, so it's not what you think of New Jersey. It's almost it is a different world. I love New Orleans. I got a lot of friends in Baton Rouge, so I've been out through that corridor mainly, where I between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. It's kind of where my it takes me. But when I get into town, I'm usually in New Orleans. The food is excellent. We have good pizza up here, though. So
see, you might make my wife happy if I'm ever in New Jersey. You're gonna have to show us all the good pizza places. She loves pizza. Look, we buy Domino's so much they send my wife's gift cards every quarter. So, but yeah, Dr. Michael, yeah, it's I will say this. I will give you credit on something. You didn't say Baton Rouge. You said Baton Rouge. So you've been in Louisiana long enough. I know you can speak our language. So.
Thank you, my friend.
No problem, Dr. Michael. See you next time. That was Dr. Michael Schwartz, the writer of Fauci's Fiction. Go check out his book. Go check out his podcast, Mike's Right. Great guy, great book. What I've read so far on Amazon, go check him out. It'll help out this fellow conservative out and this fellow doctor to get the facts out there. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and take our break, and we'll be back with Alan Sebald, Senate candidate for District 31 here in Louisiana. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back in a few moments.